What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. The big seasonal patch was pretty wacky. Luckily, a very quick hotfix patch came in yesterday. I want to review the changes and as well kind of make updates based on the state of the balance overall and maybe clarify some things that I've said, especially in my tier list, for example. A lot of people were surprised that I don't rate Orisa very highly, and I'll explain that. But for tank, they are exchanging some of Orisa's base health away from the armor to her normal health, basically just reducing her sustain a bit. So instead of having 350 armor, it'll be down to 300, and 50 of that is exchanged to base health. So the same overall amount, however, you'll cut into that base health sooner, which makes her a lot more squishy, especially against the damage types that are bad against armor and really, really badly need to get her into that normal health to even stand a chance of dealing any damage. Energy Javelin's damage has been reduced as well, down to 70, and these little minute breakpoints, they really start to add up either over time or in the breakpoint battle, because now that we have a very widely diverse hero cast in terms of health pools, you really start to notice that the brawly nature of the game means that you can't just like very easily go at consistently certain duels to get an expected result, because before you know it, they switch characters and are able to withstand things that you maybe would always burst, let's say, in that same situation. So that matters, and as well, ult over time. With the game being more brawly, anytime damage numbers goes down on a key ability as well, that starts to add up as well. Now, Fortify no longer reduces fusion driver heat regeneration. I actually forgot this was a thing, okay? All right, now I want to talk about Orisa as a general principle of the game. It's pretty interesting. If you go look at the top 500 leaderboard right now, what I want you to do is like take a survey of the different players that have a lot of time on Orisa. A lot of times, surprisingly, and this shows up on Overbuff as well, their win rates aren't high necessarily. Like the highest I saw was a top player with like 53% win rate, near champion, okay? But if you look through like the lower end of top 500, masters and whatnot, a lot of times these players have negative win rates on Orisa, or even at best. And the reason for that is Orisa as a character is sort of like Reaper, let's say, where the skill ceiling is kind of capped. She's good at neutraling out in a tank fight, where there's a lot of texture to the tank gameplay in Overwatch, and Orisa can kind of just be like, I don't want to engage in that, and can play keep away, be very defensive, and put out a moderate amount of offense. She doesn't really do anything so special other than be good at getting shot at, and for some time, but then gets whittled down over time. She doesn't take the initiative. She doesn't take over the game necessarily. She sort of just keeps you where you're at. So when I make a tier list, and I'm looking to give advice to players on how to rank up, Orisa is really a trap character, because similar to a character like Reaper, you would be better off on characters that have higher skill expression and learn how to execute those cooldown loops, like the gameplay cycle of that character, and exploit it. So a good example for Reaper is Tracer, where Tracer's got a lot more skill expression. Orisa, there's just better versions of her for a ranking up character. She's good at not dying and not making a mistake, similar to Reaper, right? Who also coincidentally starts to like look even more oppressive, or is more easy to play around better teammates. Whereas if you want to carry bad teammates who are making mistakes, which is often the majority of your gameplay, is your team's making a mistake, how do you still win despite that? And Orisa doesn't fix that. Orisa is not a mistake eraser by taking over the game. She just doesn't make mistakes herself. So she's very durable in that regard. So still, with these nerfs, that just like emboldens my opinion even more. I don't suggest her as a rank up hero. Now, moving over to Ramatra, where this was a change that I was not a huge fan of. And overall in these seasons, it seems like once in a while they just toss out a crazy idea, like they had Sig Flux could go through walls for a second. Ramatra, they try to rework him, where for a moment, he no longer would penetrate with his punches through shields and instead did extra damage to it. I didn't like this mechanic. It made it a little too rock, paper, scissors-y for my liking, where I just like wouldn't want to play in that kind of matchup, or was even better against other things. I don't think this is the type of character you want to all of a sudden turn into a counter pick piece, where Ram is sort of the stable Overwatch 2 tank. He's very flexible in his playstyle and is my favorite tank overall for the 5v5 format. And as we saw in Spylo's video, Ram really suffers in 6v6, and we can expect him to really not add much if we eventually do go to that format. Another video will be coming up. I'll talk about the blog post in the next vid, probably tomorrow. But I'm really happy with them reverting this, because if they're going to try kind of dumb changes that I think is just like, why even reinvent the character? At least they're willing to like take it back once they get data or get the impression of the community. And Ram's just like not that oppressive of a tank in general, that he didn't have much flavor other than being able to pierce, right? Like that was the cool thing that he did. And I'm always going to die on the hill that I'd rather characters have their identity and do a cool thing regardless of meta, rather than like have it just shaved down so that they fit in some perfect balance philosophy, because it's just never going to happen, especially for the vast majority of players anyway. Now, changes to Wrecking Ball. Quad Cannon's ammo's increased from 80 to 100, and the duration on Grappling Claw goes up from 6 to 8 seconds, allowing you to do more like tethering nonsense and hold your ground and shoot longer. Having played on the patch a little bit today, actually, I did notice that like in certain tank matchups, or when Wrecking Ball wanted to stand and deliver, the damage matters. Like having 20 extra bullets means you're going to, like, let's say, keep shooting with your team on whatever sustainy brawly thing that there is, and more likely to reach the break point of dealing enough damage together, whether you're like team shooting the enemy Winston or going at a support. Like they start to get away, they dodge you. Having extra ammo really matters, because Wrecking Ball's downtime and the small little windows he has to do damage meaningfully against a very brawly, sustainy game. A lot of characters have the abilities now to either dodge away or self-sustain, or they go around the corner and heal. And like, so Wrecking Ball is just kind of like a bad tank for the newest version of 5v5. There's different iterations where I think he was better or worse, but generally not a great 5v5 tank anyway. So this kind of allows him to stand and do his thing, whether it's like tethering and hitting you multiple times with melees, or being able to hard engage and shoot things down. Keep in mind, like, he's pretty decent against Juno, actually. And Juno's a very powerful hero. So he can disrupt in her ultimate, which is one of the best ults in the game, probably the number one if I had to rate it. And then also as well having some consistent hit scan damage to be able to shoot her at medium range as she's flying around, in order to try to punish her big play, of course, which is coming around and getting the pulsar torpedoes. Now, the damage roll, they did a wacky rework to Sombra, and they're going to be tuning that a little bit, where Hack now exits stealth when hacking an enemy target. So you can no longer get a free hack in Viz, which I think is a little weird anyway, because there already was the animation, so you can kind of sense where it was coming from regardless. So whether she's in Viz or not, like, you're going to get shot at. I don't know, kind of a weird mechanic. This whole thing is just kind of weird overall. But now Translocator's delay before entering stealth has been reduced even lower now to 0.33 of a second, so you enter stealth a bit faster, and the fade in time has reduced as well, down from 0.3 of a second to 0.15 of a second, so you get in stealth much faster. But the ultimate cost has also been reduced, so this is another buff by 10%. The new Sombra I rated as like the worst character in the game, honestly. Like, there's a big debate about what we even want Sombra to do, and now that Sombra, who is a very easy flank piece in order to get a free kill on Widow, is gone, kind of, because she's so hard to play now, perhaps a bit better after this patch. Now Widow's like a dominant hero, and well, I think there's other options to flank Widow, but once you don't have the permanent guaranteed invis Sombra flank on a Widow, you realize just how flexible she is to play a variety of positions. And then even as you try to counter her in an obvious way, like with an obvious dive from the front, the problem with that is the supports that are very durable on the enemy team either have Suzu, Life Grip, Lamp, or there's just a lot of ways to save that Widowmaker player if you know where the dive could come from or the flank could come from, where even the more sneakier characters like Tracer or probably just Tracer in comparison to Sombra, you can sense it coming, right? And especially for the tanks diving the Widow, you can save them. So Widow has kind of risen in stock now that Sombra's gone down, and I think, especially after listening to the Group Up podcast that just went live recently, they were talking about like the personality of Widow versus Sombra, and I think high rank players often forget just how prevalent Sombra was in the average tier of play, because she's very easy to play in that infinite or permanent invis version, where because you have Virus, which is like moderately difficult to hit, but if you have a free flank to go way in the back and kind of wait for the Widow, you can play this weird tactical game where you're permanently invis and just wait for the opportune moment. And almost like any DPS player should be able to land that play, right? So it just meant that Widow was hard marked and checked for the vast majority of ranks by this very easy to replicate playstyle. And there's quite a few DPS characters that are, I think, pretty easy to play, or just game sense and timing, right? Reaper, Venture, whatever. Sombra's like another one of these that had that cycle. And anyway, that's the general thoughts I have about Sombra, that she was like hard marking things in the lower levels of play. And I think that these buffs will definitely help her get out of the gutter, is kind of exactly what I expected, but not good enough for me to care. Like, whether she comes in and out of stealth doesn't really make that much of a difference to me. It's mainly her positioning of where she can get to with the amount of stealth that she has, which is only 5 seconds, and then how flexible she is with translocator. Like, the previous version actually had a pretty good gameplay flow with infinite stealth. Like, yeah, you could get anywhere you wanted, but you were only so potent that you still had to set up and then be kind of like mechanically skilled. Now it's so hard to consistently play that same way. You have to play so reserved that the new version of Sombra is really boring, in my opinion. And you can't be as creative with your movements. And I don't know, the personality is kind of dead for me. Going in and out of stealth is just kind of a lame thing overall. So I don't know how I feel about that. Like, outplaying a permanently invis character is definitely annoying, but at the current iteration, I preferred that old version, but either way, people are going to complain. So not a very easy character for the devs to balance or to make interesting to both play and play against. Always going to be divisive, kind of a no-win situation with Sombra. Now, the last change is going to be to Juno, where the healing has been reduced in Orbital Ray from 100 to 85 healing per second. Still quite a lot, but these numbers start to add up over time when you start to think about, like, well, she can heal her team in the ult as the ult heals them. So these numbers keep getting more and more bigger, right? And having just like a little bit lower means like maybe you have to focus on healing a teammate rather than dealing damage with the ult in order to save them from death. But either way, just how long and sort of brooding the Orbital Ray is, if you use it on the checkpoint, it's one of those ults, it really reminds of Kyrie ult, basically. Whereas when Kyrie ult came out, the stats on it were so high that if you just put it on the team fight, on the checkpoint, you're going to win the checkpoint fight. That's how strong it was. Just jump in it and vaguely look in the right direction, and the enemy either has to run or they will die. So probably the strongest ult in the game, and maybe I think even stronger potentially than that original Kyrie ult was, because it feels easier because you can direct it and move in with it. So where you can even place it is a little bit more flexible. And yeah, I don't know, it's just pretty nuts. On top of the fact that because Juno already changes the positioning of your team, you can kind of surprise them with going in faster, or you can disengage on the ult fight anyway. So she already had those tools just with her ult aside, where she was strong in the ult fight. Then she also has a strong ult herself, which I think is a little bit rare for the support category. Usually, like, you don't have compounding strengths in a given area of your kit, where either you're kind of a strong mid-fight character, a strong ult character. As an example, in a comparison, it's like Lucio, beat is pretty good, but it always charged really slow. They just kept nerfing how long it charged, so that despite the fact that you have a massive advantage as Lucio to reposition your team against ult, speed is like one of the best counters to ults, because, oh, they're ulting, we run away, right? Think of how many ults work that way, where they're trying to engage with an ult, and if you just move out of the way, that's like the biggest, most economical counter you can have. Well, Juno gives you that opportunity to do that, and her ult sort of like comes online and is as effective as some of those other ults. It's flexible in that it can sustain you against a lot of things and then also be able to be offensive. That's kind of rare, right? It's not as much stats as maybe Sound Barrier is, but with how flanky and mobile the game is anyway, you can dodge Sound Barrier and it doesn't add offense, right? Whereas Juno's ult does. Kind of a nuts ult overall. So, guys, I was sick for a while and then went away, but now that I'm back, we'll look more at this season, which I think is playing out pretty well. And then as well, got a lot of good feedback on the 6v6 video. We will record next for tomorrow the video looking at the blog post talking about the different 6v6 modes. So I'll catch you guys on the next vid tomorrow. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.